know it's been so long since I've put out a video. And I know that I've been saying these update on Catastrophe videos will be used to supplement the countdown to Catastrophe videos that are taking longer. And I haven't been putting out these update on Catastrophe videos either, but like, it's all I want to do is just talk about the stuff going on in the world and talk about all the research I've done for my book and things like this. And I haven't been able to because capitalism and busy schedules and da-da-da-da-da. But this India-Pakistan shit is crazy. So I just want to note, in 2023, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, who put out that doomsday clock, which basically says the closer we get to midnight, the closer we are to just like global catastrophe, they moved that clock from 100 seconds to midnight to 90 seconds to midnight. And the reason they did this was Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Russia being a nuclear power. Then this year, they moved it from 90 seconds to 89 seconds. And they said that was in part because, quote, conflict in the Middle East threatens to spiral out of control. And they're referring to Israel, a nuclear power, conducting their genocide in Gaza and bombing Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, countries they've bombed all of this past week. And now the Bulletin moves the clock yearly. So we're going to have to wait till January to find out how close they think we are to midnight now. But I imagine they're going to say closer, considering India and Pakistan are both nuclear powers and they are escalating towards all-out war with each other. And ultimately, what we're dealing with in the case of Jammu and Kashmir and in the case of Gaza is a legacy of colonialism that the world has not yet properly grappled with. In both those cases, untidy colonial borders created opportunities for newly created states to exploit vulnerable populations out of their own sovereignty. In 1947, at the time of the partition between India and Pakistan, Kashmir was a Muslim-majority principality that chose to be neutral. However, tribal militias from Pakistan, fearing the ruler of Kashmir was planning on joining India, invaded, prompting an Indian response, which escalated to the first war between India and Pakistan and the division of the territory between the two states. 2/3 of Jammu and Kashmir landing in the hands of India. So fast forward to the 21st century, following two more wars between India and Pakistan, both states acquiring nuclear weapons, and Jammu and Kashmir becoming one of the most militarized places on earth, militias in the territory, like many who view themselves as occupied, turn to violence in many instances towards civilian populations. And it's a tale as old as time. We see this same dynamic happening in the 20th century with the Tamils and the Sri Lankan government, with the IRA and the British government. When people are occupied, elements will turn to violence. Now, in 2019, India revoked Article 370 of the Indian Constitution, which was implemented in 1947, which granted Jammu and Kashmir autonomous status. While they was still under the protectorate of the Indian government, they had their own flag, they had their own assembly, and there's tangible effects of that. Last September, Amnesty International said the authorities' escalating repression of human rights after India revoked the special autonomous status of the region has resulted in arbitrary detentions, passports being revoked, the creation of opaque no-fly lists, the denial of entry into India, and arbitrary cancellations of overseas citizenship of India status, and affected those with Indian and non-Indian citizenship speaking out against the repression. Arising out of increased repression comes in April 22nd of this year, a really horrible terrorist attack that kills 26 civilians. And we're going to pause here before we get to what happens next and talk about, briefly, Israel and Palestine. Even before the partition of the United Nations goes into effect, back in February of 1948, Israeli forces begin a mass expulsion operation, which results in 750,000 Palestinians being kicked out of their land. And then in 1967, following the Six-Day War, Israel militarily occupies, among a number of territories, the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. And what we see with the Israeli occupation is fierce repression, night raids, killings of civilians, land theft, internment. All of this until 2005, when Israel pulls out of the middle of Gaza but keeps the occupation on virtually all other aspects, turning Gaza into an open-air prison. And I've gone over the history of that in a number of videos, but I just want to highlight one UN report from 2022, which found Gazans are, quote, with inadequate access to clean water, without electricity for half the day, and without a proper sewage system. 2/3 of the population live in poverty, with a 41% probability of dropping out of the labor force, and for those who continue to seek work, there's a 45% probability of being unemployed. Now, under these conditions, October 7th takes place, not unlike the terror attack in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, taking it one step further with Israel, how do they respond? With genocide. Amnesty International has called what's happening a genocide. Since March 8th, they haven't allowed any humanitarian assistance in, which has led to over 50 people dying from starvation as tents are bombed, as refugee camps are bombed. Interestingly, in similar power dynamics, India and Israel have sort of started to connect. This is made evident in the Israeli embassy putting out a picture from that Studio Ghibli AI technology of Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, and Netanyahu standing next to each other with the words "tale of friendship." Both these leaders have arisen as part of their own sort of late capitalist specific fascist movements, in that they've highlighted anti-Muslim bigotry and national security alongside neoliberal economics. So it's why we see things like Netanyahu attacking the administrative state and Modi opening up India to multinational corporations, while also fierce repression against Muslim communities. And we've already seen Modi taking a page out of the Israeli book, revoking the Indus Water Treaty that India and Pakistan have with each other, which allows Pakistan access to water within India, water that, by the way, 80% of Pakistani farmers rely on. And I want to end by noting the occupations of West Papua by Indonesia and the Western Sahara by Morocco are both supported by the United States. Though it was defeated, we saw the New Zealand government try to pass a bill that would tear up the treaty with the Maori people. Black people in America still don't have reparations. Trump's trying to open up Alcatraz again, which according to the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty is Sioux land. Not only do we need to account for the extremely legitimate grievances of occupied peoples and marginalized peoples around the world, because that's the moral and right thing to do. But if we want a global society that is cohesive and stable and just, we have to deal with the centuries-old legacy of colonialism, imperialism, slavery, and genocide.